So one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about today, Andy, was burnout. So we know that that's a pretty big issue in structural engineering just due to the high stress nature of the job. And I'm curious, how have you handled that and managed that throughout your career?
I think it comes from multiple aspects. Number one is you want to do what you love, first of all. So if you don't love structural engineering, then it's not too late to change. And I don't want to talk people on the structural engineering channel podcast to get out of structural engineering, but you need to love what you're doing because we're designing serious stuff, right? Like we're designing steel and wood and we're designing buildings basically.
Burnout is a pressing issue in the structural engineering field, and it's not hard to see why. It's a high-stress profession that requires constant attention to detail, rigorous calculations, and the weight of responsibility for public safety. Both professionals and students alike are susceptible to burnout, and its consequences can be devastating. If left unchecked, burnout can lead to decreased productivity, poor job satisfaction, and even physical and mental health problems. Joining us in this episode is Andy Richardson, SE, Principal Engineer of 29E6 and host of ENHANCE AEC, to talk about overcoming burnout, delivering excellence in structural engineering, and how his 6E framework can help engineers build a sustainable and fulfilling career. I'm your co-host, Matt Picardal.
And I'm your co-host, Rachel Holland, and this is the Structural Engineering Channel.
Andy, thanks so much for joining us. Can you start by telling our listeners a little bit about yourself and what sparked your interest in structural engineering and even your journey to finding 29E6?
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Rachel, for having me on. It's so a little bit about me is I started out in civil engineering, and I actually started out with a desire to go into architecture initially, just growing up and learning hand drafting in high school. So I might be dating myself a little bit. And I really just enjoyed drawing. I enjoyed math. And so as many of us in the structural engineering field, what our guidance counselors in high school told us if we're good at math and science is we should go into, engineering or architecture. And initially I was like, okay, well, I'm going to go into architecture. Well, I didn't quite get into architecture school, believe it or not. It was harder at the school I went to, Clemson, to get into architecture than engineering. And so I went and grabbed the catalog, again, dating myself because we didn't have internet at the time. So grabbed the catalog and looked
You're
at it.
You're not alone, Andy. You're not alone.
And it said civil engineering is like the broadest realm of engineering and deals with buildings. And I said, that's basically the same thing as architecture. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I went ahead and went into structural engineering and really haven't looked back since. My first job was more civil, multidisciplinary type company, which what I found is a lot of the older school, like small town companies were like that. Even still now, you'll see some of that where maybe one day you design a detention pond and another day you design a steel beam. And it's not that uncommon in smaller towns, especially, which I'm in South Carolina in the East Coast, the Low Country, we call it, near Charleston, Hilton Head. It's a small town called Beaufort. And so that's a little bit about how I got started with my career in engineering and worked for a few small companies. And then eventually 2009 happened, and it's also, some call it the Great Recession. So I got laid off, and at that time, I had also been reading some business books and thought, you know what, I'm going to go and do this myself, and work on my own for a while. And that's what I did. I worked as a sole practitioner for a few years from 2009 to 2017. And I also did some PE education, PPI, Kaplan, and helped them out with some passing the PE exam. So one of the ways I was able to diversify during those low years of the recession, was able to do that. And one of the things I really enjoy is mentoring and teaching and education. And that's one of the values that we have at 29E6 is mentoring and education. And so anyway, 2017, I enjoyed doing sole practitionership because, it's got a lot of advantages, right? I mean, you get to do a lot of different variety of things. You get to do the business side. You also get to design buildings. But on the downside of it, you don't have a team, right? And so I decided I wanted a team, and I wanted to have, if I took a day off, I had somebody else designing buildings, right? Or, maybe I'm not as good with like Revit or things like that. So we are able to have a team, right? And so that's what we started doing in 2017 was growing the company. So I rebranded the company, 29E6, which hopefully our audience knows what that is. But if not, it's the modulus of elasticity of steel is what 29E6 stands for, 29E6 or exponent 6. Now, for those of you that are in metric units, that would be 29 million PSI. So that's the Young's modulus or modulus of elasticity. So that's a little bit about me, Matt, and my background.
Were you going to say something, Matt? I felt like I was about to cut you off. Go.
No, I was gonna ask that 29E6. Then it made perfect sense when you mentioned the modulus of elasticity of steel. It's like, okay, I get it. Yeah, that's really interesting about starting up your own firm, and then what you were saying about it's good to work for yourself, but then what happens if you want to take a day off, or if you don't like accounting, or if you don't like drafting? Then what? Well, you need the team. So yeah, that makes sense on where that comes from.
How many people are you guys up to now?
It depends on how you count them, but about 18 right now.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I say that half joking, but we have a variety of work arrangements, contract based or W-2 based, and I say that we're a post-COVID remote company because we have people all over the country, all over the world, and also working in different arrangements as well. So, like I have, for example, an OG, which is an office gopher, who's my son, and he's, 19 years old, but he's a college age guy who, helps me out with like, hey, I need you to go to Staples and get some stuff. Or my wife who does, deposits checks. But then I also have people, in various states that do design work full time. So that's why I say somewhat jokingly, like, it depends on how you count them, right?
Right. Definitely. So one of the topics I wanted to talk to you about today, Andy, was burnout. So we know that that's a pretty big issue in structural engineering just due to the high stress nature of the job. And I'm curious, how have you handled that and managed that throughout your career?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question as far as how to deal with burnout. And I think it comes from multiple aspects. Number one is you want to do what you love, first of all. So if you don't love structural engineering, then it's not too late to change. And I don't want to talk people on the structural engineering channel podcast to like get out of structural engineering, but you need to love what you're doing because we're designing serious stuff, right? Like we're designing steel and wood and we're designing buildings basically. And maybe it means you love the field of structural engineering, but perhaps the aspect you're doing isn't the perfect aspect for you. So like understanding your personality profile and working, like maybe it's going to work in sales instead of doing calculations all day. Or maybe you actually enjoy really drawing, something like that. Or maybe you really like management, or vice versa, you don't like management. And somehow because we see this paradox where the best engineers are promoted to management, and all of a sudden now you're in a position you don't like. So that's one aspect, is understanding who you are and making sure you work in that. Another aspect is I read this, or I used to listen to a guy named Dan Miller, 48 Days to the Work You Love, and he talks a lot about some of these principles, right? And so like the personality profile, but also change, I think, is a good thing, right? I mean, and so I'm a 5-year man, meaning I try to change a little bit every 5 years. So like if you did a 20% change to what your work life is like, what your personality is like, what your everything happening in your life is like, then over 5 years, like everything is completely different, right? So you don't have to like change your whole job in 1 year. What you could do is shift things little by little. So like, for example, with the management engineering example, maybe you're an engineer who you want to become a manager. Well, over 5 years, you could be that, right? So you start reading some books about management and you say, well, what if I dipped my toe in the water of this management aspect or project management? So that's one of the things I do is I like to incorporate a little bit of change every year. So those are a few things I think will help with burnout.
Yeah, I found personally for me too, like, I mean, I've been at Simpson for 13 years, but I'm on my kind of like my fourth role. So it's like same thing, like just having like that the new challenge, or just seeing a different side of it to just kind of keep things new, right? You want to, like, you need to have a little bit of change every once in a while. For me too, again, that's a personal thing. Some people want to stay consistent.
Right, that's true. I mean, and obviously that comes from my own opinion. I don't really like doing the same thing every year. I know, like from my experience, it was like the first 5 year was all about just learn the craft and get the PE, and
Yeah.
then it seemed like, okay, master that, like become the best and become project manager and learn a little bit more about business. And so it seemed like 5 years was a good number, right?
Yeah, agree. I also like that you mentioned about, like, you're not encouraging people to leave the structural engineering field. But again, it's like, this is a topic that Matt and I cover quite a bit, but just there's so many different roles you can play within the entire like structural engineering industry, right? Like having our knowledge and our background and our abilities to do certain things. There's so many different career paths you can take within that, where that knowledge is still really important and plays a critical role in what you're doing.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, you definitely a lot of aspects you can take just within this field.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been seeing what throughout the industry. Obviously, the principals that are head of engineering, but they're really good with business development, networking, that type of stuff. But then you also have drafters or BIM coordinators that have their SEs, but they transition to leadership roles in that, or even programmers or technical specialists. It's
Hmm.
it's like, yeah, it's really flexible in terms of where you can go, even sales departments. And yeah, that's what I tell the younger engineers. Like, if something doesn't quite fit, there's a lot of options that you can do with your structural engineering degree. It's just, yeah, like you were mentioning, Andy, like that personality, knowing what type of personality you have and trying to match that up with what's out there. There's a lot out there.
Yeah, and it may be a bad fit with the company. It might be you. Like you may need to improve as you get really good at something, you actually enjoy it more, right? So maybe it's just you didn't spend enough time on that craft. I mean, like I'm learning the guitar and I'm not very good at it, but as I start to become better and better at it, it's like, okay, I actually learned how to strum a song and it's actually fun. But the first year of doing it is like it hurts, it's not very fun, it doesn't sound very good, and I might just want to give up. But what if I just kept going for a couple more years? It might actually sound good. So maybe
Yeah.
structural engineering
Totally.
is similar, right?
Yes.
And like with that comes with, getting good enough where you can do good quality work. But in our field, as you know, we have to produce high quality standards, and that puts more pressure on everything. How do you overcome those challenges about trying to maintain that high standard in our industry? Without maybe, I guess, balancing that. How do you maintain those high standards?
Wow, that's a great question. How to maintain standards in structural engineering? I mean, it is what we do, right? That's what we do. I mean, at 2096, we call it the 6 E's. So one of those is ensure safety, and every week we go over those, and I usually say, well, this is the most important one. But that really is the most important one, ensuring safety, and safety is because there's a subset of serviceability, right? That's important as well. And also durability, meaning buildings can't just be safe, they also have to be serviceable. So deflection, vibration, corrosion, all these different aspects have to be accounted for. And plus, by the way, they want us to do that and do it on time, and do it efficiently, right? So that's a challenge, and we're dealing with change as well, and also people, and that's people internally, people externally. And so how do you deal with those things? There's a few aspects. I call it the 3 R's: right, reviewable, repeatable. And so everything has to be right because, as we mentioned, we're dealing with safety, but it also has to be reviewable. So a professional engineer has to sign off on that. So if an EIT is working on that, then it has to be in a reviewable state. So that's where the repeatable comes in, because it helps us have processes to where we can, in other words, if I'm the PE reviewing something, then and it's in a state that I can easily understand because I've seen it that same way, then it helps me review it quicker, which then goes to the efficiency piece. But also it helps me review it, period, right? And like understand what you did. And it also helps you as the EIT to do it because there's a process for that, right? It's a repeatable process that you can work with your other EITs or your PE, and like y'all can work together to get a quality product. And that actual process can be QA'd as well, not just the calculation for this building, but the process for creating all the buildings can be QA'd. So those are, I call it the 3 R's, and I find that to be helpful. And then the part of the repeatable aspect is having a process in place to begin with, right? Like a QA process is a big part of that. And that's where, the repeatable helps, because it, if I'm the QA engineer and then the final engineer, I can look at that and see what's being done. But having a process in place really helps, I think, to help with quality.
What about, you mentioned, okay, you have the 3 R's and the 6 E's. So with your 6E framework, that obviously comes into play in how you approach structural engineering, right? So can you walk us through that and explain how it helps engineers improve their work? If I understood what you were just talking about, like you were explaining just one of the 6 E's.
Yeah, that was.
Do you have 6 of them?
Sorry, that was ensure safety. So yeah.
Okay, yeah. So what are the other 5? How does it work for you guys?
Oh yeah, I love talking about it. I mean, because it's our values. It's what gets me up in the morning. So yeah, definitely love talking about our 6 E's. So there's 3 E's that I believe every business. It doesn't matter what you're doing. If you're a baker or an engineer, you need these first 3, right? So number 1 is excellence. You have to be excellent at what you do, or nobody's going to buy your cookies, or nobody's going to buy your buildings. You have to earn a profit, because that's the lifeblood of a business. You can't run a business without profit. It's not to say that's the only issue. And just like insuring, while it's super important, it's not the only issue, because if I don't earn a profit, I don't have a business to ensure safety. Excellence, earn, and then enjoy. You have to enjoy what you're doing, or you'll burn out, right? And then you go out of business as well. So those are the 3 that every business has to have. And then as a structural engineer, we have 3 additional. Number 1 is what we just said. We have to ensure safety. That's what we do. And we went into that in great detail. Number 2 is efficiency. That's like the how. That's kind of like the USP, unique selling proposition. I mean, every business has to have something that they bring to the table. Like, why am I hiring 2096, or why am I hiring Simpson Strong Tie, or whoever it is? You have to have a unique selling proposition. So one of those is efficiency. We say that we provide streamlined structural engineering, including construction support. And so we want to make sure that we're providing an efficient, and in 3 different aspects. Number 1 is the process of the design has to be efficient. So like that's the time to complete the work. Number 2 is the construction process has to be efficient. So like building the building has to be, like, instead of it taking 2 years, it should maybe take a year or whatever. And then the final one, of course, is the construction cost has to be efficient. So there's 3 subsets of efficiency as well. And all 3 have to be tight, or you won't get another job from that client, right? And then the final one, which is one I get excited about, is enhance. And it's really like the reason you get up in the morning: enhance the world around you. It's the idea that it sounds like a Miss America pageant a little bit, right? But it's the idea that we're making the world a better place, and so through the buildings that we do and the relationships that we have, like this podcast today, for example, we're hopefully making the world a better place because we're helping these younger engineers, these, engineers that might be ahead of us in years and experience, but nonetheless, we're helping them hopefully through our conversation today. Like, it's enhancing the world around us. I mean, that's exciting to me, right? Like, we have an impact on the world through our work. And what you're doing, Rachel, and what you're doing, Matt, with your daily work, it's making the world a better place. So that's exciting. I mean, it's a stressful thing because we're dealing with ensuring safety. And what we started out the conversation today was burnout and stress and et cetera. But then Enhance gives us a reason to do that. Otherwise, we'd just quit because, like, this sounds stressful.
Yeah.
So those the 6 E's.
I think that totally is, that's right where it is. It's like you can get like bogged down in your day-to-day tasks and kind of forget the bigger picture. And I think that is when like probably burnout really tends to kick in a bit more. But it's like if you just get up, from whatever you're doing and like see what we're doing on a bigger level as like a profession, it's really incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And we say that our 6 E's help us reach our ultimate goal, which is to provide glory to God through excellence in structural engineering. So I should have answered the burnout question with that, but I didn't. But that is a
you
good
got there.
burnout.
You got there eventually, so it's perfect.
That is a good burnout thing because our why helps us with the burnout, because I can get through today if I remember what my why is.
Yeah, it's like it's hard work, but it's work that's worth doing, that's important. And like you were saying, it enhances, like, yeah, especially the stuff that we do, it enhances people's lives because you just look around and there's structural engineering everywhere, some way, somehow, and each of us are doing our part to be a part of that.
Right.
And going back to some of the work that you do, I know your firm takes on a wide variety of projects versus some firms that may be super niche down into one special thing. You guys seem to have a wide variety, a wide scope. What are some of the benefits and challenges of that working with that type of business model?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the challenges of working, do you cast a wider net or do you niche down? We say niche here in the South, but do I cast a wider net, right? Like, we also are here on the coast, so we have like these shrimp nets where you can cast them out and catch shrimp, right? And so, which one's better? Well, I mean, some people say the riches are in the niches, right? And so I definitely see value in that. I mean, I have examples of colleagues that do connection design, and that's all they do is design connections. And I think they're doing very well for themselves. Or parking garages, or a post-tension concrete or tilt-up concrete. So these are niches that you can go into, and I think that's great. But the reason that I focus on casting a wider net is a couple reasons. One, the primary reason actually is we work for architects primarily, and most of those architects we work for are companies about our size, between 1 and 10 or 20 people. And a lot of those architectural companies are casting a wider net themselves. And so when they want to engineer, we want to be their guy, right? That's my ultimate and so if you have a house and you need it engineered, we're your guy. If you have a building and you need it engineered and it's made out of steel, or it's made out of light gauge steel, or it's made out of wood or post-tension concrete, we're still your guy. So when you got a problem, you call us. I mean, it's like if you need some batteries or some milk, you go to Walmart. So like we kind of want to be the same thing in that regard. That's really the primary reason we do that. And also it does have a couple of side benefits. Is as somebody who started my business in the Great Recession, I'm always fearful. Fear is not a great way to run the business, but I'm always concerned about, is this going to be the next downturn? So I'm not ever going to turn away work. That's my mentality. Is that a good mentality or a bad mentality? I don't know, actually, but that's my mentality. That's what drives me a lot in my decision making. So those are a few reasons why we're like the Swiss Army knife, if you will, of structural engineering versus a connection designer. I mean, if you had a huge Amazon warehouse and I would refer you to a connection designer. I mean, we might look at it and say, I think we can handle that. But we might actually refer you out if it was like a 20-story building. That might be a bit much for us. So there's a time and place for a Swiss Army knife, right?
Yeah.
Making sure you can get all the 60s in there for that type of project. And
exactly.
Yeah, it's like, and I imagine too, with all the recessions and even when during the ups and downs, having a varied work can help with I don't know, redundancy, safety factors. One industry goes down, then at least you have maybe residential to help back it up and during those hard times.
Yeah, I mean,
worked for a smaller design firm before, prior to working at Simpson, and it was similar. Like, it's one of those things that I think as a business owner, you want to make sure that you have work down the pipeline, because it's your livelihood, it's all of your employees' livelihoods, and I think as a result, you tend to be just a little bit more diversified in what you do, because it's just kind of like the nature of the beast when you're in that situation,
Exactly.
So I get it. And I think it actually is, I think it's kind of a cool opportunity. I mean, not only for yourself, but for your employees, because they get to see like all these different kinds of things. Whereas sometimes, again, every company is totally different, but sometimes when you're at a bigger firm, you can kind of get pigeonholed into working on specific type of project. And then, like we were talking about before, you can, depending upon who you are and your likes and everything, you could maybe get bored with that. So it keeps it, keeps it real. You got to switch it up a lot.
Definitely. I mean, I can say we've had a few engineers that have come to me because of that very issue. Like, they're doing well in their jobs, and maybe they're working for a like pre-engineered metal building company where that's all they do is one type of one-story building. And I'm sure you get some variety and some interesting things, but we're doing wood, we're doing masonry, we're doing concrete, we're doing houses, we're doing buildings, and it's challenged. Like, if you're not going to have the redundancy, you're going to have the opposite issue of, I can't keep up. I mean, I'm just learning a masonry now. I got to learn wood, and they're two different codes, like literally two different codes. So that is the opposite challenge. But then one of my engineers came in and said, I figured it out. And I was like, what are you talking about? And because this was prior to us being post-COVID remote company. But he said, I figured it out. All materials, it doesn't really matter. They're all the same. It's all about shear, moment, and deflection. And I was like, you're absolutely right. Every material is basically the same. It's you're dealing with some different codes and some different principles, but at the end of the day, it's the same stuff. It's just codified differently, it's written up differently. And that's what's cool about doing the multiple materials, is at some point you realize it all has a confluence to the same thing.
Right. What about, okay, so we have all these different challenges with like different types of jobs, but what about also, you do a lot of coastal work, you do seismic work, like those also have different, requirements and codes and everything else, right? Added on to the different material types. So what should structural engineers keep in mind when they're working in like these different environments and types of loading that are going to govern?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I want to point out too, I mean, you want to have somebody who understands these things. So whether it's the seismic or the wind, or you're working on a new material type, maybe you've never done wood before and this is your first wood job, or maybe you've never done post-tension concrete, it's your first post-tension concrete job. So anytime I do something that I'm not familiar with, I will bring in an expert that will sign off on that job, and then eventually, as I feel comfortable with it, I will do the job. So because we are dealing with serious stuff again, you want to have a mentor to help you through that, right? And an expert to help you through that. So that's really number one, is make sure you have a pro that knows what they're doing. And whether that's in your company, or if you're a sole practitioner and you're like, I really want to do this wood job, Well, bring in an expert. I mean, you can do that, right? As long as you're following the ethical, requirements of your board of engineers, then you can do that. But, obviously we live in an awesome age. We have AI, we have computers, we have LinkedIn, meaning we have a way to reach out to experts in California and say, what are y'all doing in California to deal with these things, right? With these seismic requirements and AEC 7 and all these different things. So those are a few ideas. Obviously the internet and Google is a great tool still, right? But, and there's a ton of guides and guidance, YouTube, in terms of learning these things. But sometimes you just have to put your head down in a good old book and go through those materials and learn it and just do it. And then under that mentor that you're working with. So I don't know if I kind of more answered generically, but as far as specifically on coastal aspects or seismic aspects, I don't think I answered that one specifically. I
think you kind of did. It's like, you gotta know what you're designing for. And if you're not an expert in it, you have to reach out and find an expert or get up to speed on it.
Right. I mean, and sometimes you get rusty on things too, like coastal requirements. I realized today, working on this job that was in a, what's called a coastal A zone. Do you guys know what that is? Yeah, so there's a velocity zone, and then there's an A zone, and then there's a coastal A zone. So a velocity zone or V zone is where the wave action of water during a hurricane, it will, it creates a lot of force on the building and also creates scour. So there's a few things you have to account for. Number one, you have to make sure the foundation is open. So that's why you see a lot of these beach houses that have the open foundations with like the piles. It doesn't have to be wood piles, but you see that a lot. And then you have A zone, which just means you have rising waters, okay? But then you also have this middle ground, which is called coastal A zone, and it means that you have it's in between the two. And a lot of the requirements from the V zone, velocity zone, have to be accounted for in the coastal A zone. So I got a little bit rusty on that, and I had to do some research, and that's why I was saying, like, AI is pretty amazing. I mean, with just my phone and Perplexity with the DeepSeek add-on, I was able to do some really good research. And my tip on that, by the way, is make sure if you're using AI, make sure you're getting sources. I mean, that is saying, IRC chapter 3, IBC chapter 16, section 1, 2, 3, and you can then go to that section and read it for yourself, or click on that link and go to it for yourself. But it's a tool to help you get there quicker. So that was a bonus tip about AI, but it's a hot topic obviously right now. So, but the point was, that's another thing about how to get up to speed was the AI, how to get up to speed on a subject.
Yeah, that's a good tip, and especially with some of those complex questions, you can at least look up where the code source is, since it's got to be pulling it from somewhere. Like at the end of the day, it's got to be compliant with the code.
Absolutely, yeah.
Could you give us a example, maybe like a project example of when you had to balance efficiency, safety, and code compliance?
Code compliance. Yeah, I mean, every job really is all three. So has there been a time when I've had to balance efficiency, safety, and code compliance?
When it was a challenging one, I guess maybe one of the more challenging projects.
The one that comes to my mind is there's this one in Savannah, Georgia that we were working on, and I guess it was one of the more challenging jobs we worked on in a while for a number of reasons. One of which is it was a zero lot line, but adjacent to the building next door, so we had to cantilever over that building, and making sure, obviously, I mean, cantilevers are concerning, I guess. I mean, anytime you're dealing with a cantilever, it concerns everybody involved, including the engineer. It just looks the opposite of safe.
So
right?
wait, I'm gonna ask a clarification question, because I'm not sure if I understood it. You're saying it was a zero lot line, like it came right up to the property line, but they let you cantilever over the top and exceed past that vertical line?
Yeah. So what happened? Okay. Yeah, but definitely need some more clarification. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So yeah, what happened is the garage building was built first, but they built over the lot line, so it's actually like a negative lot line. But the new building that we were working on owned the property, so they actually owned the property that the footing was on for this parking garage, and so this guy, he wanted every inch he could get, right? And so he said, "Well, cantilever over that foundation." And so the building is tucked right up to the parking garage, but the foundation is over, like 5 feet away, or more than that, like 15 feet away.
I
So our
just have to
building,
ask, like, are those neighbors friendly? The whole thing seems so strange.
yeah, I mean, everything was basically friendly. I mean,
So interesting.
there was some lawyers involved just to make sure it was all done right, but it wasn't. It was pretty friendly. Um, so yeah, I mean, the challenge that was just one aspect of it. It was challenging because we're dealing with this overhang, and we want to make sure it's safe and code compliant, as you're saying, Matt. And then also we have to do it in the most efficient way. I mean, we checked it, we double checked it, and we even triple checked it in the field. There was some concerns from the contractor. They said, "Hey, I think we're not sure about this," and so we actually had them put concrete weight on the end of the overhang of an estimated amount. I don't remember the exact amount. And then we said, if you put, I don't know, 10,000 pounds on it, let's say, it's going to deflect, let's say 5/16 of an inch or something, right? These are numbers for conversational purposes, but and so we said it's going to deflect like that. And so so I had one of our engineers look at that and said, "Hey, tell me what the estimated deflection is going to be. Put in, do a specific model for this analysis." And it needed a model because it was like a moment frame and it was a cantilever, etc. So, I mean, if you just did a simple cantilever calc, it wouldn't quite get it because of the backspan. There's, some complexities there, right? As far as, you can't just do PL cubed over 3EI in that scenario. But anyway, so we told them it's going to deflect so much, and we gave them the information, and they built this big concrete block, out of concrete, and they put it on there, and it deflected, and it came out exactly what we told them. So that was cool but the night before I was sweating. I mean, I was sweating because I was like, what if it comes out a half inch, But it came out 5/16 of an inch, or whatever the number was, right? It may have been off in a 16th, but that's pretty cool. Like, A, math works. B, we did our work, right? We did our 6 E's, and we were vindicated in what we said would be the deflection. So that was really cool. But that was an example of meeting all those requirements, because I think one of the things was, you can be too efficient. I guess in some ways it's because maybe there was a little, I'm trying to say this without, sometimes you can have too much deflection, right? Like, it meets code, it meets all these things, but it didn't quite meet the perception of what people in the field were seeing. So that tells me we could have had a little less deflection on that beam, So how do you balance that? That comes with experience. And cantilevers, try to avoid them if you can. But if you can't, then make sure you've got a beefy beam. So
Definitely. What about with, like, we've kind of talked or like led up to it a little bit, but in terms of like continuous learning and just like staying up to par in your knowledge for certain things. Obviously continuous learning is super essential in engineering, but do you have any habits or practices that you do, or resources that have helped you to sort of stay ahead in that way?
yeah, I definitely agree that continuous learning is important. I mean, one of the things I do, Rachel, is I am a big proponent of the Structural Engineer Association, like the local level. It's a grassroots organization. I mean, I think most structural engineers are aware of it. But in fact, I'm the president of the SCA here in Hilton Head. I don't say that to brag. I just say it because I believe in it, and I think more people should be a part of that, right? I mean, just yesterday we did a presentation, and I was able to get 1.5 hours of credit for going to that presentation. So, I mean, just by being a member, you're going to get, 10 hours or 15 hours. If you have a state conference, you'll get another 7 hours. So I really don't have any problem getting my continuous education hours, because I just go to the SEA stuff, and I might go grab another conference. That was one thing I think we missed with COVID, was we didn't have these in-person conferences and the in-person events. But we still have, other things that you can do, and reading and magazines are still. I mean, if you check out our podcast, my wife was on, and she was picking on me because I used to read these engineering books like in the bathtub. And the reason I say that is I had a passion for learning about my craft. That's what, I mean, that's your craft. Like, that's what you want to become an expert at. And so I was voracious. Now, I'm not as voracious about it now at 26 years in, right? But that's not that I have perfected everything. Clearly, I haven't. And that's why I go to these other things like the SEA, is I continue to learn. But I would say have a love for learning is my biggest tip for you. So I don't know if you want to read in the bathtub, but, maybe have a love for learning nonetheless.
Efficiency. Yeah, could you tell us about ENHANCE AEC? Can you tell our listeners about that, and what maybe some of the insights you've learned from talking from all these different AEC professionals?
Definitely something I'm excited about, because it's called ENHANCEAEC.co is the website, but and we're on multiple platforms. But the goal of the podcast, the genesis of it was one of those 6 E's, right? Enhance the world around us. And I thought, well, what if we did a podcast where we interviewed AEC professionals? So it's more than just engineers, it's architects, engineers, and contractors. And really even people like my son was on there. He's in the HVAC industry. And so understanding the why of people in the AEC industry, that's what we're all about. And we're finding stories of people all over, the AEC industry, and what they do, learning more about, like, okay, HVAC, what does, this person do, or other engineers, maybe geotechnical engineers. We don't have that yet, but I'm sure we'll get it. So that's really the purpose of it, is to understand the drive and the why of all aspects of people in the AEC industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think yes, promote it, right? I mean, that's what we're all trying to do, be another resource for people to learn and stay educated and hear about, like, maybe more like of the like trending topics in our industry and things like that. So I think that's great.
Yeah, that's what I learned
Yeah.
in my social media experiences. I don't know, maybe kind of different from, like, because there's so many people. I guess that abundance mindset of there's so many people online that the more you share, it's not like one person benefits. It's the more you guys share, both people benefit, or both parties benefit. I think that's from what I found, one of the more unique things about social media is, like, no, there's just so many people there that the more you know about it, it's gonna lead, like, from different audiences to whatnot. It's all about helping the audience. So the more resources you have, yeah, the better.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. So I guess to that point, I mean, you guys are invited on to my show sometimes as well, if you would like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Andy, we have a final question that we ask all of our guests, and what final piece of advice would you have for someone starting out in their career, or maybe transitioning over to this career, or just new to the structural engineering profession? What would you suggest to them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. What would I tell a young engineer starting out in structural engineering? I think I would probably lean on some of the advice I've recently seen on LinkedIn and social media, which is you got to ask questions. You got to talk and communicate to your mentors, your leaders, because these are the people that know what they're doing. That's your teachers. So you have to communicate. You don't know what you're doing. I mean, you just started out, and everybody understands that. I mean, you just got out of college, or maybe you just, I don't know, like you're just starting. And so you have to learn to communicate with other people. And as a new graduate, that's the last thing you feel like doing, because you're nervous, you're young. I mean, when I got out of college, I didn't know how to talk to people that were 50 years old. or I didn't know how to talk to people, period. It seems like. And so I was so nervous, I'd be sweating to go talk to my boss. You know, I'd be like, okay, what am I going to say? And so you just have to do it though. And you might not like it. And just, if the best thing is, if, you know, the adage of, if you got to eat a frog, go ahead and eat a frog. So that's one tip. And then the voracious learning, you know, really pick up some magazines, read at night. I mean, not that you have to do all the stuff at night, but it's the tone, it's the mentality of what you're doing. We want you to be an expert at your craft. I mean, you know, this is what you went to school for, and what you're doing is structural engineering. So be the best.
Awesome. Great tips. I love it.
Yeah. Thanks, Andy.
All right. Awesome.
So that's gonna wrap up our podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. We really have enjoyed having you here.
Yeah. Thank you both for having me on, and hope to see you again soon.
Definitely. I hope you enjoyed the episode today. We'd love to hear your feedback, comments, and/or questions. To leave them, please visit structuralengineeringchannel.com. There, you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources or websites mentioned during the episode. Don't forget to subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Until next time, we wish you the best in all of your structural engineering endeavors.